And digital teams as well. They are trying to. Yeah.
So we need to take one of the mic, right?
Yeah, yes. I'll take the lighter. Can I? No? It does. Really? Okay. Didn't know. Okay. I'll start. Jan.
That's a lot of people. Maybe we should take a picture.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Do you hear me then? Do you hear me? Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you. It doesn't. Yeah, I thought that it doesn't work.
Does it work? No, I don't think so. It works online, but
It works
okay.
online.
So we have to. I
So
think we have to speak loud for the room.
Okay. So we will speak loud. Welcome to another Vocabulary Semantic Services Interest Group. They can't hear. We know that it works for the online people, but yeah.
It's working for the online people, right? So we'll have
Yeah,
to
but we have to look after the.
speak loud.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now better? It's because it's a little bit noisy on the other side. I can.
Can you hear me? From no.
No,
Okay.
no,
So it
no.
doesn't. So still have new people coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think I will start speaking as loudly as I can. So welcome, and we are delighted to have you all here with us today to another Vocabulary Semantic Services Interest Group in Gothenburg, along with my co-chair, Jan Lefranc. I'm Alexandra Kokinaki, and we are missing our other co-chair, John Graybill, but he is in US. So we'll start today with shouting, I guess. We also need to change the slides. It doesn't work. It's all right. We have some collaborative notes online. Okay. There is a link there, and we will share the link in the chat for whoever joins. There will be time for questions after each talk. So for the participants that are here, you can raise your hand and ask a question. We will use the microphone for people online, but please use your loud voice today. And for the participants that are online, please put your questions in the chat using the the name of the presenter, and then your question. That's all. The agenda today, can we please share the slides on the board? Okay. We also want to make you aware that this session is recorded. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, you could, yeah, manual. So we will briefly talk about the VSSIG activities during the past, the present, and what is going to happen in the future. And then Gwen Moncoife will talk about the iAdapt framework and its practical implementations. I will then talk about the ontological approaches we are taking while building digital twins. Then Wolmar Ackerstrom will talk to us about their experiences from the Semantic Interoperability Task Force of the EOSC Association. Clément Jonquet will give us updates of the Onto Portal Alliance. Jan Lefranc will talk about the FAIR impact. And finally, we will have a pre-recorded presentation from Brandon Whitehead about the ESIP semantic activities. Thank you. And we hopefully will have 20 minutes to have discussions in one of the following topics or any other topics of interest that are burning the VSSIGers. Next one, please. And next one, please. So the semantics group is in a big momentum that has been triggered by the FAIR guiding principles, and especially the I of the FAIR, and more specifically the I2 of the FAIR that mandates that metadata and data should use vocabularies that follow the FAIR principles. For this reason, many task forces, groups, projects have been created, focusing on semantic interoperability, semantics, ontologies, vocabulary, semantic artifacts, and so on. Next one, please. So this group was created in 2015. It currently has 3 co-chairs, meaning John Graybill, Jan Lefranc, and myself. We have regular plenary session presences since the RDA P14, so we have been having our plenaries every time. Next one, please. And our vision is to harmonize our ways of working with semantic web technologies through knowledge and expertise exchange across all domains. Our mission is to form a network of experts in the semantic web and linked data domain to be able to share and discuss new technologies, controversial concepts, new ideas, and existing recommendations and best practices on the semantic web and linked data arena. And from these interactions, we seek to develop community-based approaches and recommendations for the development and use of FAIR semantic artifacts across domains. Currently, we have one working group, which is the iAdapt, chaired by Barbara, Gwen, Maria, and Anu, and 2 task groups, the minimum metadata task group led by Clément Jonquet and Luis Bonino, and the terms and concept recommendations by John Graybill. So currently, what we are doing is that we have been attending the RDA meetings consistently, strongly and positively. We have some working groups and task groups that are active and impactful, and some that are not that impactful. What we don't do is that we don't have regular meetings due to the fact that the 3 chairs are very, very busy working on semantics. So in the previous 2 plenaries, we have asked for some help from a co-chair. We would love to welcome a co-chair in the group. And we are asking for a co-chair in this plenary as well. So any volunteers, please find us after the session. We've also done a survey 2 plenaries ago, and some hints from that plenary were to provide more time for discussion, to figure out a way to keep on schedule and to discuss the plenary in the regular meetings that we don't do. So, next, please. So we would love to reinstate regular meetings, as you suggested, once in 2 months, discussing project outcomes, updates from working groups and task groups, best practices recommendations, and coordination for the semantic interoperability. And activities we are thinking are to expand the community, to have more task groups, promote interoperability, discuss mid-level vocabularies for certain topics, and so on. And I'll stop here. I'm not having questions now so that we can discuss them at the discussion point. And I'm giving the floor to Gwen to talk us about the iAdopt practical implementation.
Thank you. Can I? Oh, great. Great, I'm glad.
That's not the, that's mine.
So I have to read the screen?
Yeah.
All right, okay. Right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Alex, Sandra, for the to work out.
Point it this way.
Pardon? Oh, right.
Point
Oh,
that way.
my brain is not going to cope with that.
No, nothing? Really? Yeah.
All right, okay. Right, so I'm here to talk about the RDA iAdopt working group. We were formed in 2019, and we operated for 18 months. So we are currently in maintenance mode. So RDA stands for Interoperable Description of Observable Property Terminologies. Our motivation was to address the eye of FAIR by enabling interoperability between existing terminologies, promoting the use of FAIR terminologies, to annotate research data with well-identified, unambiguous, and machine-readable, actionable vocabularies. We were by 4 co-chairs, was one of them. Barbara, who is in the room, was another one. And we had also a core group with 2 additional members, Circo, who is also here, and Alison Pament. And we also had regular contribution from many others, too numerous to mention here. So as I said, we've finished our 18 months work plan. We've now got our recommendation endorsed by RDA and published. We have produced an ontology, and also we've got a GitHub repository for receiving feedback from people interested in contributing. So we're currently in maintenance mode. We're continuing working on implementing iAdopt and testing the ontology. And we're also thinking about extending the framework. So we are focusing on research data variables. Why? Well, they're often semantically very complex. They need a combination of concepts in order to be fully understood. And they're often represented with short, abbreviated labels that don't mean much to anybody but the person who's actually created them. And it's often insufficiently explained or described in data sets. And it relies very often on free text description in scientific publication and human interpretation. So from the 1990s onwards, there were control vocabularies created to address this problem. And the problem is that we created those vocabularies, but there was a lack of a common framework to enable interoperability between the diverse terminologies. And there was a necessity to provide, there was no rules to fix or to agree on the necessary level of details needed for seamless data discovery and integration. So our key objective was to deliver an interoperative framework for variable descriptions in 18 months. And we managed that. And it was published in May last year. This was our methodology. I go very quickly through it because many people would be familiar with it, and it's also documented in the publication. But basically, we're still in the green area there, where even though we've finished the work, it's still, well, we've published the ontology. We're still testing it, and I actually noticed this is a previous version. So. So what we did is to look at variables and decompose them. I have to say that, oh, sorry, this is a previous version, so I'm not very. So I have to say that we are focusing on the variable aspect. So in this case, when we talk about the concentration of nitrate in precipitation water at a particular site, in a particular unit and by a particular method, we don't want to deal with the feature or the procedures or the unit. We are only focusing on the variable. And this variable, we went through the process of splitting it into atomic elements. So identifying the components of that variable. So we went through that iterative process. We looked at what others had done, what all the other terminologies for describing, annotating variables had done in the past, the different models, ontologies, and we identified common elements to all those existing features. And we ended up with a simple ontology which had only 4 classes and 6 properties. So at the top, we've got the top concept is a variable. That variable will have a property and only one property, and it must have a property. It also must have an object of interest, which is an entity that has a role object of interest, and only one object of interest. And in addition, it can have entities which might take the role of matrices or context objects. And finally, it can also have constraints. So this is the way the ontology looks like with the different elements. So as well as the ontology, we produce a set of 5 recommendations. The description should be human and machine readable. They should be explicit and sufficient to understand to understand the variable with minimum reliance on free text documentation. It should make use of a semantic artifact. It should preferably use the IADOPT ontology or something that is compatible with the IADOPT ontology, and it should reuse IADOPT aligned terminologies. So this is the series of output we had. So the recommendation reports, the interoperability framework. We produce a catalog of terminologies as well. We produce some metadata templates. And as I've said before, we've got also a GitHub repository in which we can interact with our. This is we are currently working on the implementation use cases. This is going to be presented tomorrow at our working group session. We've got implementation in NERC vocabulary server, CF standard names, in TEA, OSCAR. So NERC vocab server is mainly marine domain, CF standard name mainly atmospheric domain, OSCAR, critical zone, terrestrial domain. ELTA Plus is another implementation terrestrial domain. Pangea, more generic, general environmental data. And also support, implementation in support of a scientific data framework funded by the NSF. And also an interesting study that Natalia Queiroz de Oliveira did using the measurement ontology language to complement the IDOM framework. So we will have this tomorrow afternoon at our session. And finally, I wanted to point out the proposals that we are making to extend the ontology to support the aggregation of IADOP variables, and that we had to add an extension to the main ontology framework by creating a new class, which is variable set, and a series of new properties. And we're currently inviting comments. It's only a proposal stage, so we are very interested in getting feedback. And I think I've reached the end of my time.
We still have 3 minutes or 5 minutes for questions. If you want to ask Gwen any questions.
kind of official standard do we use as an underlying approach for deploying this ontology?
Official standards.
Is this your own ontology that you have deployed in your understanding, or is this, for example, based on schema.org or DCAT?
All right. Yeah, the element that deals with a variable, we created from new, but we identify connections with existing frameworks and existing ontologies. So we would have the iAdopt ontology expand elements of schema.org and element of SOSA and other ontologies as well. So it is connected, but more detailed. Barbara.
I would like to expand.
We need the mic because the people online cannot hear us.
So I would like to expand on this. So I perceive iAdopt as a fair semantic crosswalk, because actually you can keep your variable as you have. You have just to extend the description of it by adding these atomic parts. And while you are doing this, in that way, you can make it interoperable. Yeah. So it's we are not reinventing stuff. We want to reuse existing variables, but encourage a better description of these. Yeah. That's the goal.
Did you want to respond to that, or?
No, that was a...
I just want to say congratulations, because not only did you develop, you actually have implementation cases. And I think this is a very important contribution. How you got, I mean, obviously there was a need from communities, but the fact that you have, in this short time frame, actually made that step and discuss implementations, I think lessons learned, that because we all know there are so many cases of vocabularies people think they need and then they never go and test. And so I just want to encourage you to write it up and share it, because it's a nice success story.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Yeah, it is already written up. And I think to reinforce your point as well is that we are working with operational already
Good.
operational terminologies.
Excellent.
So it's yes,
I have one question for Alex and Jan. Are the notes, like if we go into the interest group, because people who want to contribute to the notes, are they accessible from the RDA page? The collaborative notes, because you only put up the link in the beginning. Like if people want to help.
yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I didn't get in there yet,
Yeah.
but you could put the citation.
The session is recorded, so
Good,
everything
excellent.
is...
Thank you.
So I can only tell you. Sorry, very quick. Yeah, I just want to say this started from the need to provide variables from a research infrastructure. So it was not born from nothing. It was really a need, and therefore it is also applied.
Okay, thank you very much, Gwen and Barbara. And we are going to go to the next one, which I'm presenting. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is ontological approaches for digital twins. I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues that we have been doing this work in the UK. So, digital twin, I'm pretty sure you've heard the word a lot of times. It's a virtual representation of a physical asset enabled through data and simulators to achieve real-time prediction, optimization, monitoring, controlling, and most importantly, to improve decision-making. A digital twin differs from the traditional modeling tool as it is interoperable and federated and designed with user interactivity in mind. To build digital twins, we need to develop the Information Management Framework, IMF, to support data and information flows. And for this reason, we worked in the roadmap of an information management framework that was completed and reported in 2022. And the publication by Sidon et al. Is at the bottom of this slide. On the left, you can see a table showing the activities that run from the left to the right to be able to have an information management framework. And we are currently working on a pilot study that started in October 2022 to test and develop the framework. So we are building a digital twin, having the case study on marine biodiversity. The digital twin that we want to build is on that. Does that have a pointer? It's all right if it doesn't, but so it's a digital twin about the Hague-Fras marine protected area that can be shown on that map on with the yellow color. And these are some of the pictures taken from underwater vehicles showing the Hague-Fras marine protected area. Our aim is to test and develop the information management framework for the environmental digital twins, along with monitoring and predicting changes to the benthic communities in the Hague-Fras marine protected area, and of course, develop and share tools and assets to support future digital twins. So the proposed architecture for an information management framework for environmental digital twins is shown here. And today I will be focusing on the heart of this architecture, which is the asset commons, which is a generalization of the data commons. We want the environmental assets to be fair. And these assets include data workflows, the digital twin itself, and they will be supported by ontologies and vocabularies. At the heart of the asset commons is the asset register, or the asset catalog, or the asset commons register. And what that is a catalog of the assets of the digital twin that is supported by ontologies and vocabularies and includes detailed information about its asset, like, for example, its description, location if it has, URL, policies, standards, permissions, provenance information, and so on. Why we are doing that is to be able to track and manage our assets, to have them as a single point of access, to be able to share digital twin components with other digital twins, have a point of discoverability, and of course, as a point of interoperability and transparency, both internally and externally. This is how an asset register could look like, and it could include one or more digital twins, and each digital twin could have data sets, collections of them, software, models, services, workflows, standards, semantic artifacts. And we want this asset register to be interoperable with other asset registers. And these are some of the ontologies and the vocabularies that are already available so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, that we can reuse. And I have some questions today, having a first iteration of trying to model this asset register using already existing ontologies like DCAT. So we are seeing the asset register as a DCAT catalog of resources, and the digital twin as an SSN system that could be extended. And then that it has data sets, services, resources that could be standards, software, and so on, all of them coming from different existing ontologies and vocabularies. We also we already use upper level ontologies like Dublin Core and SCOS, but we want alignment with top level ontologies, and that's crucial for the interoperability of the digital twins. So this is the list. And we do all of that because we want to have a web of digital twins that, and we will need translation engines that allow the standardized data to be easily transferred from one standard to another if they are needed, while the upper level ontologies will act as semantic bridges to support very broad semantic interoperability between the domain ontologies. Final slide are questions and suggestions about creating task groups about digital twins and how to bring them closer, and many other questions and suggestions I had while doing this work. I'll stop here to respect the time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Any quick questions? We have 3 minutes per question for Alexandra. No, well, maybe a comment I can do. So I've heard alignment with top-level ontologies. So you should definitively look into the work that is being done in OntoCommons project, because they are working on aligning 3 top-level ontologies together: BFO, Dolce, and MO, which is dedicated for material science. So, and there's a lot of work that is done. Well, not necessarily dedicated to material science. I see Garrett nodding. So, but yeah, so there is some work in that area that is being done, and it's a complex work. So there are a lot of things that you can look into there.
Yeah, I've seen that, so I'm definitely gonna get in touch with you.
Hi, I'm Yuri from ETH Zurich, from Eleni Hatz's group on structural health monitoring. And my PhD is kind of related to work that I'm trying to do right now, is related to making decision support systems that have digital twins underlying there. And related to your questions on how do we involve more people maybe in this topic of digital twin developments and aligning ontologies, is I can say that from my side and my experience trying to work on these things, and is you would have to engage definitely each community separately, because by the nature of ontology, it's being built for certain purpose and in a certain domain, and for domain ontology to be aligned with some top level of ontologies, you would have to engage each group separately, and it's not always the case that domain specialists would be able right away to interact with you with a common vocabulary. And that's the difficulty we have found in wind energy specifically, that it was very difficult for domain experts to get into the terminology, into the concepts of knowledge engineering, of data modeling, of creating ontologies. So at least if anyone interested in wind energy ontologies, they shouldn't. we can form a group. Yeah, but in general, I think it would require a lot of.
Keep in mind that we will be the digital twins will need data from different domains.
Obviously.
So that's really important to have on the back of our minds.
Yes, yeah. But before you get to the interdomain, you have to first somehow conceptualize the domain itself.
Internally and then externally.
And what I find, at least my experience, and people here might correct me if my assumption of it is wrong, but right now, not many domains themselves are at the level where they can say, oh, we have already some common understanding of how we should model things in our domain, let alone align it with some top level ontologies. Like it's just not there in many domains.
That's another discussion that we can have even maybe later. I'm not sure. Keep it for the end, Barbara.
We do have
we have to go to the next one.
Discussion session, so we're trying to speed up the presentation so that we can actually have the possibility to chit chat for 20 minutes at least. And of course, there will be the regular meetings, or you can always use the Slack channel of the group if you want to propose a topic for discussions. And well, maybe there will be some people hanging.
Yeah. Let's move to the next slide.
Doesn't work anymore.
Sometimes it works. I'll try it out and see what happens. So my name is Volmar. I come from the European area, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the task force that has been formed in the EOSC Association around semantic interoperability. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about the context and then some of what we're working on. To start with, the EOSC Association is kind of giving feedback to the development of the European Open Science Cloud. And this is basically an idea for federation of infrastructures to bring out data and be able to interoperate between different kinds of services for the research space in Europe. The EOSC Association is a conglomerate of different organizations that have a single voice of their interest, and these are universities and other research performing organizations, and converge on a strategic research and innovation agenda and a multi-annual roadmap. And these task forces and the advisory groups that group them together are a way of getting feedback from individuals and representatives from these organizations. So EOSC Association calls for members to join these task forces to explore a certain topic under these different advisory groups. And today there are 5 different advisory groups, and you can see a listing of them here to the right. If you go to the slides after the session, you can click and read more about all of them. The one that's relevant today is the metadata and data quality advisory group, and then semantic interoperability underneath of this advisory group. The group works towards interconnected services and the semantics of data to agree on some consistency in how we describe things and how it's indexed across different infrastructures. There are many European projects that have good funding to work on these problems in depth, and this working group or task force rather is converging on some recommendations that could be disseminated across infrastructures, and we are getting feedback from our networks from people in the interest group. There's also been a publication called the EOSC Interoperability Framework, and that contained a set of recommendations that is one of the starting points of the work that we're doing. Some of the topics that are being explored is vocabularies and crosswalks, catalogs for vocabularies, and then also kind of how to put these semantic tools into practice. The approach that we've been taking is to look for synergies across the initiatives that the task force members are part of to start with. So, I mean, we might not have representation across all domains, or we might have a skew towards a certain domain, but before we kind of converge on a solution, we would make sure to ask and see to fill the different gaps that we might have. Some of the activities are exploring different themes of problems that might be we need a solution to, or something that's already being explored and active in a certain organization, strategic knowledge exchange and organizing workshops together, converging on recommendations, and we have a set of expected core deliverables, which are basically conference presentations, events, and organizations, or organized events that bring together different stakeholders. But we will also try to converge on some recommendations that could be put forward to the EOSC community. Representing the EOSC community, we have 40 members so far, active to different varying degrees in different themes of work. So Theme 1 is on metadata and standards, looking at the landscape of semantic interoperability and identifying some of the key areas that should be understood in this context. We have semantic artifact catalogs, which is defining what a semantic artifact catalog is to start with, and then producing a model of criteria for maturity of these kinds of resources. And then we're looking at use cases for interoperability. And this could be end-to-end interoperability between different repositories, or it could be on an institutional level and solving a specific type of problem. So for Theme 1, the focus has been on addressing a few questions. I'm not going to go through all of this, so please refer to the slides later on. But some aspects that are important are like, what are we going to focus on in the task force? That has been an early discussion, and then going into what these semantic interoperability aspects mean in practice for different organizations and infrastructure, and then kind of converging on some good quality recommendations and minimum recommendations for metadata. Then for semantic artifact catalogs, we have identified a set of maturity aspects based on references to articles and scientific publications that might end up being a paper down the line. Not sure it's going to be published during the term of the task force, but still something that could be put forward as basis for a recommendation. And then the use cases, we're collecting stories from organizations and then trying to look for commonalities that can be used to compare or contrast different types of solutions and identifying different types of semantic artifacts or tools that could be presented as options for people doing implementations. And with that, this is a summary slide showing the current state of things in this task force. So I think I can leave this open while we take questions, since this has been a very fast talk. And I mean, it's a broad scope of activities. And so far, we are going from the original task force charter that we defined, which is focusing on outputs of kind of scientific articles, conferences, and these kinds of meetings type of deliverables, towards something that could be endorsed by EOSC Association and be part of different, the strategic research agenda going for the next period, and maybe some shorter recommendations documents that we could put in the hands of different stakeholders in this area.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Yeah. Or else I would ask.
There is a question or comment on the metadata standards and the semantic artifacts. So I assume now, let's say, semantic artifacts also then go into the domains. For example, they could describe a certain domain and be artifacts for that, whereas the metadata standards are typically minimum to describe data sets. The question is, how do you go from one to the other? So how do you bridge the gap between describing really at a high level, okay, here is a data set to the domain? I find that always very difficult to bridge, right? There's like two worlds of the people that are about the data set itself, and it's very important, and then I want to be a user of that, and then I need something else, and I have no, do you have any recommendations to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal experience, maybe not from the task force experience. I mean, one thing is that semantic artifacts in this context is a definition that we have adopted from the Fair's Fair project, and it's basically a machine digestible form of a schema or a standard or something like that. So it's a generalization for describing, for example, a metadata schema or standard. But I mean, there is a distinction then on people on a technical understanding. I mean, going from these perhaps PDF versions of vocabularies or the ways of encoding things to the machine operable artifacts that could be delivered and indexed in these catalogs and systems. So I think some of the use cases might be addressing those kinds of issues to give examples of how people have solved it. But I don't think that there is kind of one and all solutions for addressing, I mean, interoperability across domains and going from the specifics to the more general, even though some people might be doing some work to, I mean, suggest some minimum recommendations based on the kinds of searches that are envisioned for this common catalog of data or something like that.
Anybody else having a question? You are tempted, Barbara. Okay, a quick one.
I just see it a bit different, because for me, semantic artifacts can be used for your metadata. So I see them as resources that you can, to make machine readable descriptions of your metadata. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, both for metadata and for data, right? I mean, you were part of the Fair's Fair project, so you probably know the discussions behind and the intention, but...
Yeah, I also see the metadata standard as the exchange protocol, really, and the semantic artifacts that could include ontologies and vocabularies and all of that are doing a different job. Ontologies are the structure and the vocabularies are what goes into the structures. But yeah, that's maybe for the end of the for the discussion in the end. One more is when you say semantic artifact catalogs, do you mean semantic repositories?
Perhaps. I mean, this is a question about semantics. What do you mean?
Okay,
So
this is why we need to clarify the semantics.
yeah, so I mean, there is a good definition. So the person who has been responsible for driving that work forward, he has basically started the structure for a paper, and there he goes into detail what the definition for this specific scope of work is. And I don't have that in my head, but it might have been on this. No, I probably removed it from the slide, but
Okay.
I could add it as a link or something like that, and then
or we
include
could work in regular meetings and clarify altogether this kind of thoughts and different ways of thinking of the same thing. Or have many ways, I don't know, like we need one unambiguous word to refer to something, or else people tend to be really confused, especially when things were called ontologies and then vocabularies and then something else, and people were really, really confused. They didn't want to go near the semantic domain. So, yes. Yeah, thank you very much.
And that's a key example of semantic interoperability between humans, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to agree on terminology, definitions, and that's why we invented the semantic artifact concept, because you started having a room with experts that are actually arguing about, is it a vocabulary? Oh, no, it's not an ontology. Yes, it's an ontology in a sort. So you spend more time doing that rather than really getting the work done. If you want this.
As you wish. I mean, I can take two. This one is a little lighter, that's true. And in Fair Impact, the commitment at the beginning of the project was that we're going to avoid the debate of saying what's a semantic artifact at the beginning of each project meeting. Otherwise, we're not going to. Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Clément Jonquet. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Alexandra, for having me today. I've been presenting, talking, and participating in this working group for like 5 years, something like that. We're usually working mostly on ontology metadata, where I was for some time animating a small group on that. And we've been also working with John Graybill, a colleague in the group, on the Ontoportal work that was presented several times. So I'm giving you an update of what's going on at the Ontoportal Alliance, which is an organization developing a technology and partnership for developing ontology repositories. And because we are in the subject here, semantic artifact catalogs, that are also a term that we have adopted to illustrate that we are going for ontology repositories, but also to handle other kind of semantic artifacts in our technology. So I'll try to go as fast as I can because they said that they're going to upload after 7 minutes. Okay, so I've been carrying this slide with me for about 5 years too. That one explaining that ontology repositories help make ontology fair and address those screenshots are for the Ontoportal technology, the one that we deploy in RAE called AgroPortal. And so it helps really makes them findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I know, I don't know where the E is gone. So the Ontoportal Alliance is really an effort of synchronizing and mutualizing research and development. I insist on the research and development aspect. The idea is we want to be together to do the research on semantic artifact together, but also the technology. We want to facilitate and avoid redeveloping things that have been already developing. Originally, there was BioPortal, and they start releasing the software, BioPortal, and they start releasing the software as an open source technology. And in about a few years, starting originally with AgroPortal, but then EcoPortal that was launched in one of the RDA meeting here, we developed several instances of the technology that runs typically for different communities, but not only. For example, the biomedical domain can have one in Chinese, one in French, because the portal is not necessarily multilingual, or the stakeholders are not always the same. But at LIRM and in RAE now we push for the AgroPortal, for example, instance, and in the context of the development of that instance, then we work on with the group. But really, the motivation is to increase the semantic uptake and facilitate the reuse of something. So this is the state of the status. Oh, sorry. This is the state of the situation right now. We had a new portal recently on materials about 2 years ago, an industry done in the context of the Onto Commons project that was mentioned. And the new kids on the block coming in are Mat Portal is on the 2 slide because that's the one before. Industry Portal has been also adopted by people in the context of the Onto Commons project, and in the context of Fair Impact, we're going to work with Data and the CNRS to work on something on earth sciences, and people in Germany are going to adopt also the technology for biodiversity. So really the idea is to show that we are really moving on as a group now, consolidating our message, our vision, making Ontoportal a real open source project. So we move completely to GitHub, where we handle the processes, the groups, the discussion. We try to take discussions as a group and move on that. So as I mentioned, there are 7 existing public repositories, 2 others are coming in. Those are the teams that we've built on GitHub to follow, and you can see that there are more and more people joining in and developing the software and participating in the fact of interacting with their use case, their stakeholders to deal with semantic artifacts. But we also have people that are using the software without telling us that they are using to, and Stanford has set up a mechanism to get information about that. So there is somewhere in the world some other 60 other version of the appliance. So we know that in the context of the alliance, we can develop the technology and synchronize our effort to address different communities. But we also know that we have a technology that is being reused sometimes by projects inside their own situation. For example, in hospitals, they have been using BioPortal very often in order to process biomedical data directly in-house. Well, I could not resist a couple of slides telling you what's going on or what's happening, what's new in the technologies recently. We've been last year working a lot on that module in the AgroPortal software called OFAIR, an ontology fairness evaluator, a tool that will help you to assess if a semantic artifact being developed and then push on the repository is fair. So we develop a methodology for that, discuss and argue that methodology, and then implement a software for that. So that's available in AgroPortal. If you upload an ontology, you get a fair score for that. And you could also play with the metadata description to improve that. And then the second big one recently has been a commitment for being better at SCOS support. And we did release something in December that really makes AgroPortal really more compliant with SCOS. We know that's a standard that's been very much adopted in the community for developing vocabularies and thesauri. And we want to be sure we can handle that more properly in BioPortal and AgroPortal and other software. That was where historically more focus on ontologies. So this is like, now we can support schemes and collection, we have new visualization and things like that. So I just wanted to say also things that are coming. I put a slide here illustrating, for example, some work that were done in the context of this group. There's some work done on consolidating a metadata model for all ontology repositories. We used to call it MOD. We are working also now in the context of fair impact, maybe to have stakeholders adopt that. We are working on multilingualism, federated services, more docs in order to documentation, in order to help people join the project. And work also on the native support of SSSOM. So that's our group. We had a workshop meeting in Montpellier in September. We're already 20 participants. We are doing another one in Lecce next year. That's our reference, the OntoPortal website, the OntoPortal GitHub, the documentation and the support email. That should be the last one, no? And the support, because always people are like wondering, are you supporting on the long term? I mean, as any infrastructure in research, we are not. So I wanted to also mention that we have projects following us and backing us. That's me.
That's brilliant.
Impressive. So we have time for, well, we have 3 minutes for questions.
I was wondering if you could expand on the federated services. Is the plan to have a federated portal or?
So I use the federated services here. That's part of the things that are coming. Of course, by increasing the size of the OntoPortal installation, people are asking us, are you synchronizing each other to actually provide a service that will be more federated? So we are working on that. We start working on that because the problem first was to be adopted, but then now we have more adoption. So we are thinking in terms of having federated search, for example, where someone can fire a search on one portal and it will go to and extend it to go to the other portal and get their retrieve back. The same with the recommender of ontology, where you can, especially for the recommender of the ontology, that is a feature that OntoPortal has. You want to have the recommendation and identify the ontology that is the most appropriate for you cross-domain. I mean, typically, Earth Portal, AgroPortal, EcoPortal, BioPortal will have things overlapping. If one day we have a portal for social humanities, it will be maybe different. And we have also other ideas in terms of federating other services in the platform. But then eventually the key feature will be to be sure that we can deploy a portal, an instance, and avoid duplicating the data in that portal because it's hosted by another one, and the federation of services make it work. So a community can say, oh, I want to set up an OntoPortal. I want to put the 5 or 10 vocabularies that are not hosted somewhere else, but I also want to use the 5 ones that are hosted somewhere else. In my UI, I don't make any difference, but in the backend, the resources are not duplicated, the version of ontologies are the same, etc.
So this also involves making sure that the information, so if I add, for example, some mapping into one of the portals, it will be shared with the others if the ontology exists there or something?
Yeah, that would be one challenge, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe there.
You mentioned that you work with hospitals. Did you work on the electronic patient records? Or?
Well, I say that as an example. BioPortal was a technology that included an annotation service that I personally was involved in it that would annotate text data, including, for example, health record. And every time an hospital has to annotate their health record with ontologies and they want to use the annotator to do that, they grab the technology and reinstall the technology in-house because there is no chance they're going to send out the text over the network. So that's one of the use cases of the OntoPortal technology, yes. One last
And then there's one question online. So.
Ooh, okay.
No, I just wanted to know, is there an editing service associated with OntoPortal at all?
Well, that is also inherited from originally Stanford. That was the group developing Protégé that started doing bioportal. So they draw a line in between the process of producing the semantic artifacts and then one day sharing them, using them, serving them. And the line was at the end of Protégé, start bioportal. We kind of follow that philosophy. So Ontoportal is not an ontology editing platform. If you want to make a difference, if you want to change it, edit it, that's not the place you go. But it's a place where when the semantic artifact leaves, you can provide feedback. So if someone wants to submit a new term, there is mechanism. There are different mechanisms. They need to be improved for that. But this kind of feedback works on the platform. But then a new cycle will be open. Then a new Protégé, Workbench, or whatever will be used, and then the release will be there. We kept that philosophy.
Shall we quickly go to the online question and then?
So there is a question from Philip. What do you mean with the SSSOM mapping repository? Can you say a bit more, maybe?
Yes, so you guys have seen that in the feature list. Well, I'm glad I put that. Well, you've been following the discussion, probably some of you, on mappings. In Fair Impact, we have a task also on making mapping fair. Jan's going to talk about it right after. We believe that's the role of Semantic Artifact Catalog to also host the mappings between those Semantic Artifact Catalog. We don't say it has worked in every domain, especially in the biomedical domain, it was super hard, but that's my vision at least for AgroPortal and maybe other communities. So if we can have the semantic artifact mappings aside of the artifact themselves, then I think we're going to have a stronger impact. And the way to do that, we were expecting for years and years a representation model to encode the representation meaning. Believe it or not, there was no. I mean, there was a couple of things, but and SSSOM become as a one proposition for that. So now we are in the process of refactoring our mapping repository, because there is already a mapping repository in the Ontoportal technology. It's part of the features that comes when you get the technology, and we need to make it compliant with SSSOM, and means like handle all of the metadata that goes with the description of mappings in SSSOM, and then so we can become an SSSOM compliant storage for mappings. That's what I meant by this sentence.
Can you keep the question for the end? Yeah, where we have a discussion.
I'll come back with pleasure.
He will come back.
And we all stick around after the session, so we can always discuss during the meeting. So
the next one, do we have the?
Oh. Well, I guess it's me.
It's Jan.
So, oh yeah. So sorry. Yes. So I just want to make a comment. I'm actually really impressed by the size of the room. It's full, and that's real pleasure. It's been 3 years we've been running online, and that was difficult. We always had people, but it's hard to assess. And here it's a real pleasure to see you all here today. So I'm gonna just briefly talk about the Fair Impact project. Was kindly introduced by Clément before. I'm also involved with Volmar and Kort on the Semantic Task Force. So basically, now you understand why we say the co-chairs are busy and we need your help. So the Fair Impact project is a project that started last year in June with 28 partners, and it's kind of a follow-up of the Fair is Fair project. And so basically it's a coordination and support action, which means we basically do not necessarily develop things in there. There is a system that represents the project that is doing the service development. We are more engaging with communities of experts, the different scientific communities, to discuss on various aspects on how to make data fair. And so here is the work package. Maybe I can skip that. And in particular, we're involved in one of the work package, which is work package 4, which focuses on metadata and semantic artifact at large, basically. So that includes the metadata schemas, the ontologies, the vocabulary. We are all inclusive in that approach. And the idea is to build a greater and more harmonized use of semantic artifacts throughout the EOSC ecosystem and beyond, right? Because the idea is that we start building some of the recommendation in that context that could be then applied and discussed here in RDA, right? So we always try to keep this interaction and feedback loop going, because I mean, if we do something, it must be useful for everyone, not just the European. And so the idea is that it should lead to semantic interoperability within and between disciplines. So what we're doing here is that we are trying to define and develop a semantic framework for governance, creation, mapping, sharing, reuse, and fairness assessment of semantic artifacts. So the whole package, basically. And we have different tasks in the work package. We have one on governance, we have one on lifecycle and catalog that is led by Clément. We have one on software, research software. And then we have one that I'm leading on crosswalk and mapping. And that's the thing I would like to discuss with you today, very briefly. And then we have also a task which is basically trying to put everything we developed in the other task in practice with real concrete use cases. In these tasks, you would not be a stranger, because in task 4.2, for instance, we're working with Alejandra to continue the work that's been discussed in the RDA VSSIG task group on minimum metadata for semantic artifacts. The idea was to actually try to come up with a minimum metadata to describe fair semantic artifacts, right? FAIR principles says, well, metadata must be rich. So what? What do you mean by rich? So it goes from one field, one property, to an infinity of property. So at some point, if you have to say, well, it must be fair, you need to set up a threshold. So the idea was to work with the communities to actually discuss and engage, to evaluate which would be the mandatory properties that we need to have so that we can retrieve and work and find basically our own ontologies, right? So we had the first session in the context of the Fair is Fair project. We had this workshop, and basically the idea was to develop a DCAT profile that is specific for the semantic artifact that includes some of these mandatory fields. So you get a sort of minimum metadata schema, well, below which you're not fair. And if you provide it, you're fair. And well, if you give more, thanks, you're fairer, right? And so we have been doing this work in previous, discussed this work in previous plenaries. You can find some of the formalization of the models on GitHub here. We have a owl and shadow representation of this minimum metadata schema and the DCAT profile. Now, the task that I'm interested in now, I haven't moved on. I'm still working with Alejandra on that minimum metadata, but it's like, how do we represent in a machine actionable, or how do we make mappings and crosswalk fair? So what mapping and crosswalk? Well, mappings is when you have three databases that talks about the same thing with three different names, right? So I'm a cat lover, so I have three databases of cat pictures. Everybody loves cat pictures. So you have one that talks about cat, the other one says kitty kitten, and the third one gives the Latin name, Felis catus. Great. So when I'm asking my computer, it does not understand. So if I ask for cat, it's going to give me cat only. It's not going to look into the two other databases. So I need to actually help them to understand that for us human, these are the same. So for them, they should be able to work with it. So this is just a very simplified view of mappings, right? There are many, many, many dimensions into mapping that needs to be taken into account. But the idea is that we make that information available fair, basically, which means machine actionable, so that our computer systems, all the clients we develop, actually can handle that kind of information. And right now, the most common format is CSV. It's put in a table. So it's usable, right? But it loses a lot of information, contextual information, and it only provides a direct one-to-one mapping that says it's exactly the same as. So there's no possibility of having variations in the meaning. So for my last slide, we are starting this work in Fair Impact. This is open to everyone. So we are organizing a first workshop with communities to start discuss, well, the practices in the communities in terms of mappings. Some of the communities are already advanced into that. And this meeting is going to happen online. So you're all welcome to join and register. It will be on the 13th of April, 1-3, from 2 to 6. And there we'll hear about community practice on mapping, and we'll have 1 hour session to discuss about requirements for making them fair. And that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll give just one question so that we have one more presentation and then we can relax through the discussion. Jan, can you share that with the RDA group? If you can send the email around about that meeting.
Sure.
Whoever is interested will join.
Video time now?
Hmm?
Is it time for the video?
I think it's time for the video, yeah. So there's one question.
I have a question. Yeah.
Barbara?
So I've heard now 3 initiatives doing the same thing. So
Sure.
we are talking about semantic mappings in Ontoportal. Tommy is doing the same work in the Faircore, whatever, project. I can't remember, and you are doing this as well. So is this a common work? Is that
So-
what is the similarity? Are you working together?
We are working together. So that's a fact, because Ontoportal, I mean, the task, the work package that deals with the mapping is led by Clément. So the idea is that we have this positive feedback loop, where basically what things we develop in Fair Impact can be used by Faircore for EOSC and Ontoportal, right? So these are interconnected and we're tightly related. So it's not like, but we look at this at different angles, right? So Faircore for EOSC developed a service that is going to be the mapping registry. So basically they will use a common model, and we are looking at the models that exist, and actually we're working with the SSSOM people to see if we can generalize that model that comes from biomedical domain, which is used for semantic alignment, if it can be used also for metadata mappings and crosswalks, right? So the idea is to start evaluating the diversity of mappings, the different levels of complexity you may encounter in your work that are going to be necessary, and see how we can extend the SSSOM model so that it can fit, well, let's say at least 80% of the cases, right? And then this can be implemented into the metadata, the mapping registry in Faircore for EOSC and also in Ontoportal, right? So you get the same thing in 2 different services.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you, Jan. Thank you.
Good.
We have to go to the next one, which is the pre-recorded.
Yeah. So it's a
Presentation.
presentation from Brandon
Whitehead.
Whitehead.
So we'll have to say that it's a pre-recorded presentation. We asked for 5 minutes, it's 10, so we'll stop it at the 5. It will be available, so you can you can access it online along with the slides that are also available.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it that?
It's on the computer, it's not on the... So I guess it's working for the people online.
Oh, so is that?
I have no idea why it's not coming out there. Let's see if this works.
We are not hearing.
Yeah, they are not hearing online either.
No, it's paused. That's why.
Okay. So if it doesn't work, you know, it's online.
Yeah, I'll, it doesn't work, we'll just.
Yeah.
Which I am the chair.
Yeah, but it's just on the computer for people that are
Okay.
back of the room.
Okay, so
While we are waiting, do you mind
Yeah.
if I take a picture of the room?
that's a good idea. We are gonna wait for 2 minutes.
I'm speaking to you today on behalf of.
Excellent.
So now I need you to look at me and smile. 1, 2, 3, cheese.
We can get one afterwards as well, and I'll get you in. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So can
Thank
we?
you.
Yes.
the Earth Science Information. My name is Brandon Whitehead. I'm an environmental data scientist at Monopoly Fenua, Landcare Research in New Zealand. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Earth Science Information Partners, or ESIP, Semantic Technologies Committee, or STC, which I'm the chair, at least for the next few months. Now, some of you who might not be familiar with ESIP, I just want to let you know that has a lot of similarities with RDA in that it's sort of relies on volunteers, and it was interested in fair data and fair resources before FAIR was an acronym. And I wanted to just share with you sort of the vision of our Semantic Technologies Committee, which we've shepherded along for the last decade or so. But the main one, I think, is the first one, where we're promoting research and development of semantic technologies, especially as they support earth science data discovery, dissemination, and analysis. And the other ones are all sort of, fostering them in that one in some regard, I think, and collaborating with others. The third is the Community Ontology Repository, and the last one would be scienceandschema.org, or the SOSO cluster. So first, I appreciate this is kind of a whirlwind, so bear with me. The Suite Ontology Suite, it's been around for like 20 years. It was developed at NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab a long time ago, and then it went on hiatus for a few years, and then was released with an open license, sort of suitable for reusability. So it had some catch up to do, but the positives are it's got broad earth and environmental science concept coverage, right? So over 11,000 concepts related to these domains. It's modular, so there's 225 separate ontologies, and that's separate turtle files. So that's how it was engineered originally. We've kept it that way. After the hiatus, we sort of had to do a little work to make it web enabled. And so doing, we developed, we incorporated dereferenceable URIs, a payload ontology viewer. The ontology suite is hosted on ESIP's Community Ontology Repository, and there's a Sparkle endpoint. It's also a YASGUI viewer or query window if you want to use the browser. Now it's openly available, community owned and driven. This is the community that sort of de facto owns it. We just really maintain it and sort of serve as custodians. And it's been around for a long time, and we think it's fairly well known. Now, there are some things that, it needs some improvement in some areas, particularly the lack of concept definitions and documentation. And also, I just put some use cases up that in talking to people, there's just such a broad range of interest in specifically with Suite and how they're trying to use it and wanting to use it. And I just felt that was important. So when we're talking about sort of an ESIP roadmap and how best do we, sort of maintain and develop this resource, the question came up, what is the best way to manage diversity across the existing vocabularies, not just Suite, but all the other ones that are sort of around that may have touch points or overlap. Suite as in its domain. And one way forward that we sort of voted on and are striving towards is using Suite as a hub for definitions. So the notion is we incorporate concept definitions from other resources. They can be established as an established vocabulary that's web enabled or not. And then hopefully we will use the foster discussion around the concepts and the conceptual semantics that we use to identify areas of overlap or separation within the domain, sort of this idea of fuzzy concepts. And also use the technology as a framework to uplift other resources that maybe are only available as a PDF right now. So as examples, I've included some vocabularies here. These ones all happen to be established, but the NASA GCMD, the Global Change Master Directory, USGS Thesauri, NASA Thesaurus, and so on, most of those vocabularies have terms with a definition in them. And so we've been working to get those pulled into Suite, tagged and referenced appropriately, meaning you can query in or query definitions in or out if you want to use certain ones. And so that's sort of what we're working on now. It's ongoing, and if you want help, let me know.
So we're going to stop now if we still want to have some time for discussion. So you've seen we've actually put in a lot of effort trying to get everybody on time, but still we are 5 minutes behind on the schedule. But the recording is going to be online, so we apologize to Brendan. It's a bit long presentation with tons of very interesting things. But that actually will be our concluding presentation for today. So there are different things that we would like to discuss. There are actually these different related topics. There's maybe one that we can also add here is the future of VSSIG and the idea of what do we go from there altogether. So you're here in the room. Now we'd like to see more activity and we'd like to be helpful for everyone. So of course, being there at the plenary, the idea is to share information. I think that's the key. As Barbara mentioned, there are 3 different projects working on the same thing. So we need to talk, definitely. Okay? So how we get organized. And I think RDA is a wonderful platform because it's not European, it's international. So everybody can actually share across the different ocean information. And that's what we're aiming for.
I think so. Today I learned that RDA can support and fund new working groups. They can facilitate the creation of a new working group. So you could talk with the RDA for this concept. I just learned, so I wanted to advertise it in our group. If you wanted to create a new working group, that's a more official way of working together. But you can also create task groups that are more unofficial, and you don't have to create an outcome, but you actually have a vision that you want to have this output until this amount of time, and work on an aspect like the mappings that is kind of diverse and also not very well coordinated, I think.
Mm-hmm. But that's what we started with Clément, and then it converged on the Ferris Fair project where we ended up with this minimum metadata idea. So these are informal. We just had few meetings every now and then at some point we just move forward and do something.
Can you just clarify with regards to the help that the working group received? I mean, is that financial help or?
So initially, you get somebody to help you facilitate you with the writing up of the BOF, and then they also give you some money as well. Yeah, so have it in mind.
It'd be nice to know a little bit more.
Well, we can
Yeah,
try
I
to
just
get more
learned,
information.
and Ari asked me, said that, and I said I'll advertise it in the group so that people know.
Yeah. Is this working?
Well, it works for the online people.
Okay.
Here you have to speak a little bit louder.
Yes. So just mentioning the name of this project is RDA Tiger. So I'm leading a initiative called Fair Tracks, which we are going to try to start a working group under this umbrella, and sort of pre-approved in the application itself. We don't know exactly how this is going to work because we're just starting, but yeah, if you have some information, I'm sure I can share what I know.
Okay, who wants to start the discussion? And which topic?
Because I had a question about the mappings and crosswalk fair. So Jan, you will probably know when I say the term, say bridge concept, because this is what we've been doing in the Onto Commons. And the question is, I mean, the bridge concept in Onto Commons project is being a really rich way of annotating, providing information about a concept so as to enable people to do alignments and mappings, right? So this would be, for me, like probably right at the highest level of providing fair information, fair way of enabling that. On the other hand, this is far too detailed, probably, for the requirements of mappings and crosswalks. And so it's probably going to be, well, is it the spectrum that is required there, right? Because if you really want to align two ontologies and say, okay, I'll align them around this 2 or 3 concepts, you want to spend a lot of time making sure that your cat is the feline or whatever, and what the differences are, etc. Whereas that's probably complete overkill for many other cases where you still want to have, that type of crosswalk. So what's your recommendation there, or what's the...
So that's one thing that we are trying to investigate now, and that's why we organize these workshops, on the series of workshops. So there will be 6 workshops planned over the course of the next 2 years. One of the main issues is we need to identify the use cases and the different levels of complexity, right? So I have Ontocommon's complexity bridge concepts in mind, so we need to discuss that. I don't know if we will be able to cover this level of details and this complexity, but the idea is to actually have a list of, well, what are mappings, what are the most common mappings that are done in communities, right? We even realize that some communities, they don't even know what it is. So we also need to educate them and to explain them, well, when you start working with ontologies, if you want to reuse, avoid recreating your own concept, but maybe try to bridge with other ontologies so that it can be linked to others and so on. So they are training. Now, the things that we are discussing with Nicola from SSSOM is that we want to also investigate what we call the complex mappings, where the bridge concepts are actually very efficient, to see what we can take out from that, the minimum we could take out to actually represent these complex mappings into SSSOM, so that there's one common format. So if you want SSSOM, we're not going to change the way people are doing their mapping. We just would like to use SSSOM as sort of common exchange format of mapping, so that they can be stored in a common service and you can access them through machines and API. But it's clear that just a mapping in a table, it's definitively not enough. I mean, we don't have contextual information, so you don't know why the mapping has been made. So,
can you expand on what is the expressive power of that general formalism that you propose for mappings? If it's intended for complex, in many cases you will need complex mappings already. When you translate between human languages, you never do a one-to-one translation, correct?
Yeah.
And much more so for schemas that may prescribe certain shapes. Shapes are different. I have at one point thought you could need something like graph transformation systems or things like that. Is that something similar that you have in mind for that?
So we want to start simple, because that's complex. What you're saying, you're totally right, but it's just like starting with that, it's just we're never going to achieve anything, right? So the idea of SSSOM is to provide a simple model to represent simple mappings, right? So more than just same as, you would have something, you could use the SCOS relation, broader, narrower, and so on, that are represented in the compact information with some metadata and contextual information that describes what you're doing, right? Because indeed, it's not just always the same, it's kind of similar, and so on and so forth. So you need to take into account the difficulty of grasping human language. Actually, we saw that here in this group. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm start asking a question about what is an ontology for you. We all have different definitions, right? So again, that's why we used semantic artifact. We wanted to kill this discussion, which are endless. There are still papers debating on that, right? But we want to move forward. So, and then these complex mappings, so 1 to n, 1 to many and many to 1, and so on. So we are going to work on that with SSSOM. Right now, the format does not allow you to do that. So there is a second workshop which is organized by SSSOM, and we co-organize with them at the Biocuration Conference in Italy, end of April. So I'm going to send all the information by mail, right?
Yes.
And basically there, during this Biocuration, they have a dedicated workshop on complex mappings. and they start on, identifying the key ones. So if you have use cases, specific cases that you'd like to push, you can contact us and we'll make sure that we'll look into that.
Just wanted to highlight that iAdapt has helped enormously between mappings, creating mappings automatically. So when you try to map observable properties from one domain to the other, or from one vocabulary to the other, it was quite difficult because they were not at the same level, they were not exactly the same, and all of that. The iAdapt is a framework that actually mandates how to describe a variable using these three ingredients, and then the mapping can actually become automatic. So having frameworks around concepts of how to describe them consistently is a very big helper on achieving the mappings. And AI will also help in the
a real intelligence, right? A real intelligence you need.
So is this
not machine learning.
A crosswalk iAdapt? Can we say that that's...
So
yeah, but does it act as a crosswalk?
It acts. We want to do the same with quality.
Okay.
Together different vocabularies and different ways of expressing the same thing, but they're not on the same level. So if you have a structured description of what you want to express in a consistent way, you can actually create mappings more automatically than manually.
And
so this
my actual question was another one. So I do a lot of internal mappings so why should I register these mappings somewhere else if in my vocabulary I'm using same as, broader, or I'm already using this by building my vocabulary? Why should I register this somewhere else? But this, I hope, is not the goal, right? It's only external mappings between ontologies, more complex.
Well, if your internal mappings are actually accessible for machines, you don't need to publish them somewhere else.
Yeah.
If you have them integrated into the vocabulary, that's fine. It's when you have these vocabularies that actually, these mappings that are not. So there was Tommy first. Sorry, Tommy at the back of the room.
Have you come a bit close?
Sorry.
Hi, so I'm Tommy. I'm the coordinator for the Fair Course project, and I'm also in the PID task force. So I realized that this is a vocabulary session, but we deal a lot with the mappings and crosswalks, and the definitions we use is a mapping is something between single entities, and a crosswalk is a compilation of those single entities. You can do these mappings and crosswalks also in other digital objects besides vocabularies, such as the metadata schemas that we work on. And then what I look at a lot, or I think is very relevant, is that you need to have PIDs, not URIs, but PIDs for each of the objects which you are creating the mappings between, and crosswalks. So that you can point to each of these things that you are creating the mappings and crosswalks between, and that they will be discoverable and findable, the mappings as entities in themselves. I don't want a mapping to be a property of the entity. It is a standalone entity of its source with a PID, so that they will be discoverable and be able to reuse and extend them as well.
Have a URL or a PID for your mapping itself as well.
Yeah.
Not as part of an extension of your concept, but have a URL for your map. We do have, Barbara.
A PID, yeah. So that's Alejandra?
Yeah, just a comment that relates to this discussion, but I'm not sure if it is explicit, and perhaps it's the complex mappings you were referring to. Is the fact that, when we deal with semantic interoperability, and perhaps it's one of the topics not listed there, we also need to recognize that there will be conflicts between different communities. So some communities will agree, and they may have different mappings and different understanding of the concepts. So I think, is that what the complex mappings are intending to to record. And if not, for example, so in terms of harmonized and federated semantic artifact catalogs, that's great. But yeah, sometimes we need to recognize that we need to deal with those conflicts, and it won't be possible to harmonize. But we need to still find points of contact between communities so that we can aggregate data and yeah, do proper interoperability, even if it isn't fully possible. So yeah, that was the comment.
If I may just reply, so that's a very good comment. So complex mapping are not taken in that sense. I think sorry, forgot that speaking in the mic doesn't work on that. Complex mapping is when one concept relates to many into another schema, right? Now, what you're saying is actually totally right. There will be always conflict. Some of the mappings, they are just done because they are practical mappings. I need to answer that question. I need to make that link. It doesn't really mean anything semantically, but for me, it does work. So you want to know that, and you want to have it into a machine actionable way and with some metadata so you can assess the quality yourself on should I reuse or not that mapping. Right now, finding the mappings is just, well, you need to know where to look, basically. So if you start having these kind of things, then you can start building, for instance, social network aspects of, okay, ranking the usage of these mappings. Some institutions may actually validate this mapping and say, well, this one is validated, curated, we use it. And then you can also have some other mapping that is just practical mappings, like you would have application ontologies that are just built for one specific purpose, and that's it. Comment.
Okay, I'll try to be fast. Yeah, so in the context of the working group that we are proposing now. Sorry.
There's more noise.
In the context of the working group that we're proposing now, which is in bioinformatics, this is very interesting as a technical solution for solving, how to actually do the mapping. But my question is, how do you get in contact with groups that are in the process of doing a map? So we are interested in going from one vocabulary ontology to another's, but they might not be sort of finished and fully published, but it might be interesting to collaborate with them in that process. So
maybe VSSIG is a good platform to actually using the Slack to ask these kind of questions and see that people respond. I had the same issue, like asking for digital twins and nobody came back. So it's important to stay connected through platforms like, we will send around again an email to connect to Slack and see if we can keep connected. I don't like Slack, but I'll start using it.
It's better than mail, right?
Yeah.
Trying to follow conversational mail is just getting crazy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for being here. Really engaging audience, so thank you very much.
And don't forget, we're looking for help as co-chairs. So if you're interested, you can still contact us.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Sorry for